CEO Ryan Mitchell slipped into one of his own restaurants undercover as a dishwasher, hoping to understand why an anonymous letter had begged him to investigate the Chicago location. But what he found wasn't lazy staff or poor performance, it was Emma, a young mother surviving 13-hour shifts, unpaid training, and constant abuse. When the manager exploded at her, humiliating her in front of the entire kitchen over a mistake she didn't even make, Ryan finally hit his limit. What he decided next and the identity he revealed would flip the entire restaurant upside down within minutes. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The metal tray hit the concrete floor with a crash that made every head in the kitchen turn. Emma froze, her hands still outstretched where the tray had slipped from her grip. 15 plates scattered across the floor, marinara sauce spreading like blood across the white tiles. "Are you kidding me right now?" Dennis, the kitchen manager, crossed his arms over his barrel chest. His voice carried through the entire back area of Riverside Steakhouse, cutting through the clatter of dishes and the hiss of grills. "That's 15 plates. 15. Do you know how much that costs?" Emma's throat tightened. She'd been reaching for the tray on the top shelf, the one Dennis himself had placed there this morning, too high for her 5'3" frame. She'd asked Carlos, the line cook, to grab it, but he'd been slammed with orders. So she'd stretched, balanced on her toes, and, "I'm sorry," she whispered, dropping to her knees. The marinara was hot, soaking through her thin work pants. "I'll clean it up right now. Sorry doesn't pay for broken dishes." Dennis stood over her, arms still crossed. "This comes out of your paycheck." Emma's hands shook as she picked up the larger pieces. 15 plates. At $8 each, that was $120, nearly 3 full shifts at minimum wage. The rent was already late, her mother's medication was due for a refill. Max needed new shoes, his toes were cramping in the old ones. "Actually," a quiet voice spoke up from near the industrial sink, "I bumped into Emma when she was reaching for that tray. It was my fault." Emma looked up sharply. The new dishwasher stood there, his hands dripping soapy water onto the floor. He was tall, broad-shouldered, probably in his late 30s, with dark hair and steady brown eyes. What was his name? Ryan? He'd started just yesterday, barely spoke to anyone, kept his head down over the endless stream of dirty dishes. Dennis turned slowly. "You bumped into her?" "Yes, sir." Ryan's voice was calm, almost apologetic. "I was carrying a bus tub, wasn't paying attention. It's on me." It was a lie. Ryan had been at the sink the entire time, nowhere near Emma. She opened her mouth to say so, then closed it. Dennis was already nodding, his anger redirected. "Fine, then it comes out of your check. Both of you, actually. $60 each." Dennis turned on his heel. "And Emma, next time, ask for help instead of trying to be a hero. Clean this mess up." Emma waited until Dennis disappeared into his office before looking at Ryan. He'd already grabbed the mop and bucket. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. Ryan shrugged, pushing the mop across the tiles. "Yes, I did." Their eyes met for just a moment, something unspoken passing between them. Then Emma returned to picking up broken ceramic, her hands still shaking, wondering why a stranger would take the fall for her, and whether kindness like that would ever stop feeling so rare it hurt. Ryan watched Emma work from his position at the dish station. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to make herself invisible, head down, shoulders curved inward, as if she could fold herself small enough to avoid notice. But Ryan had seen her employee file before going undercover. He'd reviewed every Chicago employee's records, looking for patterns, trying to understand who was suffering most under the current management. Emma Hartley's application photo from 3 years ago had shown a different woman entirely. In that picture, she'd been radiant, bright smile, confident posture, wearing a crisp white shirt and looking directly at the camera with eyes that sparkled with hope. The application had been impressive: 2 years of community college with a focus on business management, volunteer work at a food bank, glowing references from her previous job at a cafe where she'd been assistant manager. Eager to learn and grow with a company that values hard work and dedication, she'd written in her cover letter, I believe in the power of hospitality to bring people together and create community. I have experience managing teams of 8 to 12 people, handling inventory and supplier relationships, and creating systems that improve both efficiency and employee satisfaction. The woman in front of him now bore little resemblance to that photo. The spark was gone, replaced by exhaustion and resignation. Her uniform hung loose on a frame that had clearly lost weight. Her hands, which should have been confident and quick, trembled with fatigue. Ryan had been working undercover in his own restaurant for exactly 24 hours, and already he'd seen enough to make his jaw clench. This wasn't the business his mother had believed in. This wasn't what Riverside Steakhouse was supposed to be. 6 years ago, when cancer took his mother at 53, Ryan had made her a promise. Sarah Mitchell had worked in restaurants her entire adult life, 2 jobs at a time, fighting for dignity in kitchens where managers treated staff like equipment. She'd saved every spare dollar to put Ryan through business school. With her last clear-headed weeks, she'd told him, when you build something, build it different, build it better. He'd built Riverside into a 20-location chain across 3 states, fine dining with reasonable prices, good benefits, fair wages, or so the corporate policies said. But policies on paper didn't mean anything if the people in charge ignored them. 3 months ago, Ryan had received an anonymous letter at corporate headquarters. No return address, just 3 pages of handwritten details about labor violations at the Chicago location. The letter had mentioned Emma Hartley by name. There's a woman here who used to be so bright and capable. She ran the morning shift at the Morning Cup Cafe, better than most managers run entire restaurants. Now she's a ghost. The system is breaking her, and nobody cares. That line had haunted Ryan. So he'd pulled Emma's file, seen the before and after, read the reference letter from her previous employer. Emma has exceptional organizational skills and natural leadership ability. She improved our customer satisfaction ratings by 18% and reduced waste by 22% through inventory systems. She designed herself. She will be an asset to any organization. Ryan realized this wasn't just about policy violations. This was about what his company was doing to people's spirits, their hope, their sense of self-worth. So he'd done what his mother would have done. He went to see for himself. Ryan arrived at Riverside at 5:15 in the morning, wanting to observe Emma's training shift. He'd spent part of last night reading through her complete file, trying to understand the full trajectory of her decline. The old performance reviews from her first year were glowing. Emma shows exceptional problem-solving skills and initiative. When we had a supplier issue that threatened to shut down breakfast service, she quickly identified 3 alternative vendors and negotiated same-day delivery. She's often the first to volunteer for difficult tasks and helps train newer employees with patience and clarity. Strong management potential. Another review. 6 months later, Emma identified an inefficiency in our prep workflow that was costing us approximately 2 hours per shift. She redesigned the station layout and created a prep list system that improved our speed by 30%. She should be considered for advancement. Then about 18 months ago, the tone changed. Emma has had multiple absences for family emergencies. While her work quality remains high when present, reliability has become inconsistent. Discussed need for improved attendance. That was when her mother's diagnosis had happened. Ryan had cross-referenced the dates. The next review, 1 year ago, Emma seems distracted and less engaged, no longer volunteers for additional responsibilities. Performance has become merely adequate, does not appear interested in advancement opportunities. The most recent review, from 2 months ago, was devastating. Emma completes assigned tasks, but shows no initiative or leadership, requires constant supervision and direction. Has been placed in unpaid training rotation for grill position, but learning curve has been slow. Not recommended for promotion or advancement at this time. Ryan had nearly thrown his laptop across the room reading that last one. Emma wasn't slow to learn, she was being exploited. And she wasn't showing no initiative because she lacked capability. She was exhausted from working unpaid overtime while caring for a sick parent, systematically ground down by a manager who punished vulnerability instead of supporting it. When Emma walked through the back door at 5:28, her hair still damp from a rushed shower. Ryan felt anger surge through him. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her uniform hanging loose on her thin frame. But as she tied on her apron and began prep work, he noticed something remarkable: competence. Despite her exhaustion, her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She surveyed the prep station, immediately identified what was missing, and began organizing with the systematic approach of someone who'd done complex inventory management. She set up her grill tools in an order that minimized movement, the kind of workflow optimization she'd been praised for in her old performance reviews. This was the Emma from the application photo, still there beneath the exhaustion and fear, still capable, still skilled, just buried under the weight of impossible circumstances and exploitative management. Dennis arrived at 6, already in a foul mood. Emma, you're on grill. New guy. Ryan, you're on dishes. Morning rush starts at 7. I don't want to hear any excuses about not keeping up. For the next 4 hours, Ryan washed dishes while watching Emma work. She managed the grill with quiet competence, handling 6 orders simultaneously without breaking a sweat. But he also noticed something else: she was helping everyone. When Maria struggled with a complicated omelet order, Emma quietly talked her through the technique while managing her own orders. When Carlos got slammed and his prep station devolved into chaos, Emma used a lull in her own orders to quickly reorganize it, not to show off, but because she saw a problem and fixed it. It was instinctive for her, this problem-solving ability that her old reviews had praised. At 10 o'clock, Dennis called her into his office. Through the window, Ryan could see him gesturing aggressively while Emma stood with her head down. The conversation lasted 8 minutes. When Emma emerged, her face was carefully blank, but Ryan saw her hands shaking as she walked to the bathroom. She was gone for 12 minutes. When she returned, her eyes were red-rimmed but dry, and she went straight back to work without a word. Ryan cornered Maria during her break. What did Dennis say to Emma? Maria, a grandmother in her 50s with kind eyes and rough hands, shook her head sadly. Same thing he tells all of us who need these jobs. That we're lucky to work here, that the economy is bad, and there are 20 people who'd take our places tomorrow. That if we can't handle the demands, maybe we're not cut out for this work. She stirred her coffee slowly. But with Emma he's worse. He knows about her mother, knows about her brother, he uses it, tells her she should be grateful he keeps her on despite all her problems. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. That's psychological abuse. That's survival, Maria corrected quietly. For Emma anyway, she can't afford to fight back. None of us can. 5 days into his undercover assignment, Ryan witnessed something that crystallized exactly who Emma really was beneath the exhaustion. It was early morning, before the restaurant opened. The walk-in refrigerator had broken down overnight, a catastrophic failure that threatened to spoil thousands of dollars worth of food and shut down service for the entire day. Dennis was on the phone with the repair company, shouting about emergency service fees, while the morning crew stood around in near panic. Emma was supposed to be setting up her grill station, but Ryan watched her walk to the walk-in, assess the situation with the focused intensity of someone solving a complex problem, then disappear into the storage area. She emerged 3 minutes later with her phone, pulling up something on the screen while mentally calculating. Then she started moving with purpose. Carlos, I need you to help me move everything from the walk-in to the basement cold storage. Maria, call that seafood supplier we use. Ask if we can borrow space in their refrigerated truck for 3 hours. Tell them we'll pay the rental fee plus $200. James, there are ice bags in the basement freezer, bring up every single one. People stared at her. Emma almost never gave directions, never took charge. Now please, Emma added, her voice firm but not unkind. We've got maybe 40 minutes before the temperature rises enough to start spoiling proteins. Something in her tone, the quiet confidence, the clarity of someone who'd managed crises before, made people move. Within seconds, the kitchen mobilized. Dennis emerged from his office, still on the phone. What the hell is going on? The walk-in is at 52 degrees and rising, Emma said, not stopping her work. FDA says we need to keep proteins below 41 degrees. I'm moving everything to temporary cold storage while we wait for repair. We can save everything if we move fast. I didn't authorize. We're losing about $1,000 every 10 minutes we wait. Emma interrupted, and for a brief moment, Ryan saw the assistant manager who'd once run an entire cafe operation. The truck rental costs $200 for 3 hours. The ice costs $30. That's a lot better than $8,000 in spoiled food and a day of lost revenue. Dennis's mouth opened and closed. He wasn't used to Emma pushing back, much less with clear cost-benefit analysis. Fine, he finally said, but if anything gets ruined, it's on you. Emma nodded once, and returned to directing the operation with the efficiency of someone who'd done emergency inventory management before. She'd clearly calculated the size of their inventory, the capacity of alternative storage, and the most efficient way to move everything. Within 35 minutes, all perishables were safely stored. The supplier's refrigerated truck pulled up exactly when Emma had said it would. She'd negotiated the rental while simultaneously organizing the transfer. When the crisis was over, Dennis disappeared back into his office without a word of thanks. The other staff members looked at Emma with new eyes, surprise and something like respect. You used to do this stuff all the time, didn't you? Carlos asked. Manage things, fix problems. Emma's confidence evaporated as quickly as it had appeared. She looked down, her shoulders curving inward again. It was a long time ago, looked like yesterday to me, Maria said quietly. But Emma was already retreating, back to her grill station, back to invisibility. Ryan watched the transformation with his heart aching. For 35 minutes, he'd seen the real Emma Hartley, the capable manager from the reference letters, the problem solver from the old performance reviews. Then she'd tucked that person away again, afraid that showing competence might somehow be used against her. Later that afternoon, Ryan found Emma sitting on the back steps during a break she'd finally taken, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her, silent for a moment. That was impressive, he said finally. This morning, the way you handled the walk-in crisis. Emma shrugged. Just common sense. No, it wasn't. That was expertise, training, experience. Ryan kept his voice gentle. You've done that kind of thing before, haven't you? Managed crises. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then I used to be an assistant manager at a cafe. It was smaller than this, but I ran the morning operations, inventory, scheduling, supplier relationships, problem solving. Her voice grew softer. I was good at it, really good. I loved the challenge of keeping everything running smoothly. What happened? Life happened. My mom got sick. I couldn't maintain the schedule anymore, couldn't be reliable. And when you can't be reliable, you can't manage people. Emma's hands twisted in her lap. So I lost that job and ended up here. And I learned pretty fast that being smart or capable doesn't matter if you're desperate. Dennis doesn't want problem solvers. He wants people who do what they're told and don't ask questions. So you hide it, Ryan said. You hide how capable you are. I survive, Emma corrected. There's a difference. Ryan wanted to tell her everything right then. That he was the owner, that he was going to fix this, that she'd never have to hide her abilities again. But he'd only been undercover for 5 days. The investigator he'd hired needed more time to document patterns across shifts, to gather evidence that would stand up legally. So instead he said, the person you were, the assistant manager who loved solving problems, she's still there. I saw her today. Emma laughed bitterly. That person doesn't help me pay rent or take care of my mom. Being smart doesn't matter when you're this broke and this scared. It will matter, Ryan said quietly. One day it will matter again. Emma looked at him curiously. You're different from most people here. You actually listen. You see things. She paused. Why are you washing dishes? You seem like you could do more. Ryan's throat tightened. Sometimes life doesn't go the way you planned. You end up somewhere you never expected, doing work that doesn't match your abilities. It was true, even if not in the way she thought. But that doesn't mean it's permanent. Things can change. For people like you maybe, Emma said. People like me, we just survive, day by day. She stood and went back inside, leaving Ryan sitting on the steps, more determined than ever to prove her wrong. 2 weeks into his undercover assignment. 14 days of watching Emma work unpaid training shifts, of documenting Dennis's abuse, of gathering evidence. Ryan witnessed Emma at her absolute lowest point. It was 1:30 in the afternoon. The lunch rush had finally ended. Emma had been working for 7.5 hours straight, covering both grill and sauté, because another cook had called out. Ryan had watched her move between stations with practiced efficiency, but he'd also noticed she hadn't eaten anything all day, not even during the brief 10-minute break she'd taken around 11. Now as she cleaned her station, Ryan saw her legs buckle slightly. She caught herself on the counter, took a deep breath, then continued working. He'd packed a lunch that morning, a turkey sandwich, an apple, a bag of chips. He hadn't touched any of it. "Hey," Ryan said, approaching Emma's station. "I packed way too much food today. You want half this sandwich? It's just going to go to waste otherwise." Emma's eyes flicked to the bag, then back to his face. He saw hunger there, quickly masked. "I'm okay, thank you though. Come on. My mom used to work in restaurants. She'd get so mad when good food went to waste. She always said." Ryan paused, genuine emotion in his voice. "She always said you never know who's going hungry, so share when you can." The mention of his mother seemed to shift something in Emma's expression. She studied his face more carefully. "Your mom worked in kitchens her whole life, 2 or 3 jobs at once sometimes." Ryan set the bag on the counter near her. "Please, you'd actually be doing me a favor. I hate seeing food wasted." Emma hesitated, then reached for the bag slowly. "Okay. Thank you, that's really kind." Ryan nodded and started to leave, giving her privacy. "Ryan," he turned back. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I used to be different, you know. Before all this, I used to be the person who helped others, who brought extra food to share. I used to have something to give." Her voice cracked. "Now I'm the person who needs help, and I hate it. I hate being this weak." Ryan's throat tightened. "You're not weak, you're dealing with impossible circumstances. There's a difference." "Is there?" Emma looked down at the sandwich bag. "Because from where I'm standing, weak is exactly what I am." "No," Ryan said firmly. "I've watched you for 2 weeks. You handle 6 orders at once without breaking a sweat. You reorganized Carlos's station when he got overwhelmed. You saved thousands of dollars worth of food when the walk-in broke. You help everyone around you even when you're exhausted. That's not weakness, that's strength." Emma wiped her eyes quickly. "Then why does it feel like I'm drowning?" "Because the system is broken," Ryan said. "Not you, the system." Emma gave him a long look, something complicated flickering across her face. Then she turned away and unwrapped the sandwich with trembling hands. From his position back at the dish station, Ryan watched her eat slowly, carefully, as if the food might disappear if she moved too fast. When she finished, she carefully folded the paper bag and tucked it into her apron pocket instead of throwing it away. The habit of someone who couldn't afford to waste anything. Ryan scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force. 10 more days. The investigator needed 10 more days to complete the documentation, to ensure they had an airtight case that would protect all the employees, not just Emma. 10 more days of watching her suffer. He didn't know if his conscience could take it. That evening, at 9:45 p.m., Ryan was finishing his shift when he noticed old Henry struggling with the industrial mop bucket. Henry was the night porter, a 67-year-old man with arthritis, gnarled hands, and a persistent stoop from decades of manual labor. He'd been with Riverside for 12 years. Tonight, Henry was moving even slower than usual, his face tight with pain. "You okay, Henry?" Ryan asked, abandoning his post. "Back's acting up. I'll manage." Henry gripped the mop handle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "Let me help." "You got your own work, son. I'm caught up." Ryan was already reaching for the mop. "Tell me what needs doing." Henry hesitated, then nodded gratefully. "Main dining room, then the bathrooms. If you could just tackle the dining room, that'd take a load off." Ryan had just started mopping when he heard footsteps. Emma stood in the doorway, her coat already on, her shift over 30 minutes ago. "I'll take the bathrooms," she said simply. Ryan blinked. "Your shift ended at 9. So did yours." Emma walked past him to the supply closet, gathering cleaning materials. Henry shouldn't have to do all this with his back hurting. Emma, you've been here since 5:30 this morning. That's 16 hours. She paused, cleaning supplies in hand, and looked at him with those exhausted dark eyes. When I was 12, my mama threw her back out at the textile factory where she worked. She couldn't bend, couldn't lift anything. Our neighbor, Mrs. Washington, she was 80 years old and had her own health problems, but she came over every single day for 3 weeks to help with cleaning and laundry. Emma's voice grew quiet. Mama asked her why. Why help us when she had her own struggles? And Mrs. Washington said, "Baby girl, being poor doesn't mean being heartless. Sometimes we're all we got. We look after each other because that's what makes us human." She straightened her shoulders. Henry's raising 4 grandkids because his daughter died. Cancer, 3 years ago. He works this job because Social Security isn't enough. If his back goes out, he can't work. If he can't work. She didn't finish the sentence. Ryan watched her gather the cleaning supplies, this young woman who could barely afford to feed herself, choosing to stay late to help someone else. Not for recognition, not for extra pay, simply because it was right. "Okay," he said. "Let's split it. You take the front bathrooms, I'll take the back, then we'll both finish the dining room together." Emma nodded and they set to work. They cleaned in companionable silence for the next hour, occasionally passing each other in the hallways. Ryan found himself watching Emma when she wasn't looking, the efficiency of her movements, the way she didn't cut corners even though no one was watching, the care she took with even the smallest tasks. This was who Emma Hartley really was. Not the broken, defeated woman Dennis's management had created, but someone with integrity and competence and quiet strength that no amount of exploitation could fully crush. When they finally finished at 11 p.m., Henry was waiting by the back door, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You two didn't have to do that," he said, his weathered voice rough with emotion. "Yes, we did," Emma replied, squeezing his shoulder gently. "You take care of all of us every single night, Henry. Let us take care of you once in a while." Henry pulled both of them into a quick hug. "You're good people. Both of you." After Henry shuffled off to clock out, Emma and Ryan walked out into the cold Chicago night together. The parking lot was nearly empty, lit by flickering streetlights. "Thank you," Emma said suddenly. "For the sandwich earlier, and for this, for helping Henry." "You're the one who stayed," Ryan pointed out. "I just followed your lead." Emma stopped walking, turned to face him. In the harsh parking lot lights, she looked fragile and fierce at the same time. "You're different from most people here. You actually see people. You care. Why?" Ryan thought about his mother, about the promise he'd made, about the real reason he was here. He wanted to tell Emma everything. Wanted to say, "Because I'm actually the owner and I'm horrified by what's happening." But the investigator needed more time. Just 10 more days. "My mama raised me to believe that how you treat people when no one's watching, that's who you really are," he said. It was true, even if incomplete. "You're a good person, Emma. That's obvious, and I think you're capable of a lot more than you're being allowed to show." Emma laughed, but there was profound sadness in it. "I used to think so too. I had plans once, finishing my degree, maybe opening my own place someday, somewhere that treated people right, but that was a different life. A different version of me that doesn't exist anymore." "She still exists," Ryan said firmly, "just buried under circumstances that would crush anyone. But Emma, those circumstances won't last forever. And when things change, things don't change for people like me," Emma interrupted, her voice flat. "I learned that a long time ago. You just survive. Day by day. Hour by hour. And maybe if you're lucky you help a few people along the way so your existence means something." She headed toward the bus stop, limping slightly in her worn-out shoes. Ryan watched her go, his resolve hardening into steel. Tomorrow, he'd push the investigator to work faster. He'd make sure they had everything they needed. Because he couldn't watch Emma believe she was powerless for one more day than absolutely necessary. 3 weeks and 2 days after Ryan started working undercover, 23 days of documentation, of watching, of gathering evidence. Everything came to a head on a Saturday evening. The dinner rush was in full chaos. The restaurant was packed, the kitchen was understaffed because 2 cooks had called out sick, and Dennis was prowling between stations like a predator looking for someone to blame. Emma had been working for 13 straight hours. She'd covered the morning prep shift, starting at 5:30 a.m., stayed through lunch when coverage fell through, and now she was on the dinner line, managing both grill and sauté. Her feet ached, her head pounded. But she kept moving with that same competence she'd shown even on her first day, juggling 6 orders at once with practiced efficiency. Order up, table 17 needs their steaks redone. Dennis slammed the plates down at Emma's station hard enough to make everyone jump. Customer says they're overcooked. This is the 4th sendback tonight. What the hell is wrong with you? Emma stared at the steaks. They were cooked exactly as ordered, medium rare, with a perfect pink center. She'd been cooking steaks for 3 years. She knew what she was doing. More than that, she'd checked the ticket herself. The order had specifically said medium rare warm red center. These steaks were textbook perfect. These look exactly right to me, Emma said carefully, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. The ticket says medium rare, and that's what I cooked. Did I ask for your opinion? Dennis's face was turning red. The customer says they're wrong, so they're wrong, cook them again. Dennis, if I cook these more, they'll be medium or medium well. That's not what the ticket. I don't care what the ticket says. Dennis was shouting now, drawing the attention of everyone in the kitchen. You're either too stupid to cook a steak right, or too lazy to care. Which is it? Something flickered behind Emma's eyes, a flash of the confident assistant manager she used to be. The woman who'd handled difficult customers and unfair complaints with calm professionalism. Ryan saw it from across the kitchen, the moment when Emma's exhaustion cracked and her real self broke through. I'm neither stupid nor lazy, Emma said quietly, but her voice carried through the sudden silence. I've cooked hundreds of steaks, maybe thousands. These are done correctly. If the customer changed their mind about the temperature they wanted, that's not my error. The kitchen went absolutely silent. No one spoke to Dennis like that. No one pushed back. Dennis's eyes narrowed dangerously. You want to talk back to me? You, who's been working unpaid training shifts for 2 weeks because you're supposedly too incompetent to learn a basic grill station. You think you have the right to question my judgment. I learned this grill in 3 days, Emma said, and now there was steel in her voice, the remnants of the manager who'd once run an entire cafe operation. I've been covering shifts for 2 weeks unpaid, because you're understaffed and you know I'm good at this. I've been working for free because you told me I had to, or I'd lose my job. Emma's hands were shaking, but she didn't back down. But I'm not incompetent. I'm not stupid. I'm tired of being treated like I am when you know, I'm capable of more than this. Ryan's hands clenched around the plate he was washing. This was it. The moment Emma's real self, the capable, intelligent woman from the application photo, finally refused to stay hidden anymore. You want to know what you are? Dennis stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. You're a washed-up single mother who's lucky to have any job at all. You think anyone else would put up with your constant family emergencies and distracted work. You think you have options. His voice dripped with contempt. I kept you on out of charity, and this is the thanks I get. Emma's face went pale, but she held her ground. It's not charity if I'm working for free, that's called exploitation, and it's illegal. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. Emma's voice shook but didn't break. What you're doing, the unpaid training, the wage theft, the hostile work environment, all of it is illegal. And I'm not the only one suffering. There are 8 other people in this kitchen being exploited the exact same way. Then maybe you should all find jobs elsewhere. Dennis's sneer was vicious. Because you know what, Emma, you're fired. Pack your stuff and get out. Let's see how well your family does without even this paycheck. Emma's face crumbled for just a second, fear and devastation flickering across her features. Ryan saw her think about her mother, about Max, about the rent that was already late. Saw her almost break, almost back down. But then something remarkable happened. Emma straightened her shoulders, and Ryan saw the woman she used to be standing there in full force. Fine, Emma said, her voice steady now. But I want it in writing. I want documentation that you're firing me specifically for speaking up about labor violations. Because I'm pretty sure corporate would be very interested to know that you've been running an illegal exploitation scheme for how long has it been, Dennis? 2 years? 3? Dennis's face went from red to pale in an instant. You wouldn't dare. Ryan's phone buzzed once in his pocket, a silent vibration he had been waiting for all evening. 3 hours earlier, During a brief moment alone behind the restaurant, he had finally done what he'd been preparing for since day one, sent the signal. Not a report, not an update, a single line, "It's happening, come now." Margaret had replied with only 3 words, "On our way." So when Dennis sputtered and blustered, when Emma refused to fold, when tension snapped tight in the air, Ryan already knew what that vibration meant. They were here. Exactly when he'd asked them to arrive. Exactly at the moment Dennis crossed the last line. He kept his eyes on Emma, but his pulse hammered hard enough to bruise. And then actually, a woman's voice interrupted from the kitchen entrance. She wouldn't have to. "We already have all the documentation we need." Everyone turned. Margaret Smith stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 HR representatives and a lawyer Ryan recognized from the corporate legal team. Behind them a security guard waited. "Who the hell are you?" Dennis demanded, but Ryan could hear the fear creeping into his voice. "Margaret Smith, Director of Human Resources for Riverside Steakhouse Corporate Office." She walked into the kitchen with calm, controlled authority. "And you're Dennis Walker, currently terminated effective immediately for multiple labor violations, including wage theft, workplace harassment, safety violations, wrongful termination, and retaliation against employees who reported concerns." Dennis's mouth opened and closed. You can't just, we have documentation spanning the last 3 weeks. Margaret continued, her voice ice cold, time-stamped photographs, recorded conversations, written statements from 17 current and former employees, financial records showing systematic wage theft, totaling over $43,000 across a 2-year period. She pulled out a folder. "We have everything, Mr. Walker, including the conversation that occurred 2 minutes ago, which was recorded." She gestured to the security guard. "You have 5 minutes to collect personal items from your office under supervision. Then you'll be escorted from the premises. If you attempt to return, you'll be arrested for trespassing. Human Resources will contact you regarding the formal termination process and legal proceedings." Dennis looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape or an ally. Finding none, he was led away by security, still sputtering protests that died in the hallway. The kitchen remained frozen in stunned silence. Margaret turned to address everyone. "I apologize for the dramatic interruption. What happened here tonight, what's been happening here for years, is unconscionable and does not represent Riverside's values. Tomorrow we'll be conducting individual meetings with each of you to discuss your situations, answer questions, and make things right." She looked at Emma with something like respect. "Miss Hartley, thank you for speaking up. That took remarkable courage." Emma was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. "Am I fired? Absolutely not. In fact, I'd like to schedule a private meeting with you tomorrow afternoon, to discuss your situation specifically." Then Margaret looked directly at Ryan, who'd moved closer during the confrontation. "Mr. Mitchell, would you like to introduce yourself?" The kitchen went absolutely silent. Emma's eyes snapped to Ryan, confusion flickering across her face. "Mitchell." Ryan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. This was it. "My name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm the CEO and owner of Riverside Steakhouse. I've been working undercover for the last 3 weeks to document labor violations at this location." The shock on Emma's face was absolute. Her mouth opened, closed. She took a step back, shaking her head slowly, as if she could deny what she'd just heard. "You're, what?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm the owner. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous letter about violations here. My corporate team investigated and found nothing because people were too afraid to report while Dennis was watching. So I came to see for myself. You lied to me." Emma's voice was flat, emotionless, but Ryan could see the betrayal blooming in her eyes. "You watched me. You saw everything, me eating garbage, struggling, desperate, and you just watched." "Emma, I needed to document the full extent." "No." Emma was backing toward the door now, her face a mask of hurt and fury. "No, you don't get to explain this away. You pretended to be my friend. You shared your food with me like some act of charity. You helped Henry with me like we were in this together. And the whole time you were just, what? Gathering data, studying us like we're some kind of social experiment. That's not how it was. Then how was it, Ryan? Emma's voice rose, cracking with emotion, and Ryan saw tears streaming down her face. How was it exactly? You're a millionaire who played dress-up as a poor person for 3 weeks. You watched me eat garbage so you could document it. You let me trust you, let me think someone actually saw me as a human being, and it was all a lie. The caring was real, Ryan said, his own voice rough with emotion. Emma, everything I felt was based on a lie. Emma yanked off her apron, threw it on the counter. I trusted you. The one person in this whole place I thought actually understood what it was like to struggle, to be powerless, to be scared, and you were secretly the person with all the power the entire time. She looked around at the other staff members, all watching with expressions ranging from shock to betrayal. Did any of you know? Was I the only one stupid enough to believe he was real? Nobody knew, Margaret said gently. Miss Hartley, I understand you're upset, but perhaps we could speak privately. I need to leave. Emma was already moving toward the back door, grabbing her coat from the hook. I need to get out of here. I need to think. Emma, please wait. Ryan reached for her, but she jerked away from his touch like it burned. Don't touch me. Don't talk to me. She looked at him with eyes full of devastation. I told you things, personal things, about my mom, about Max, about who I used to be. I let you see me at my absolute lowest, because I thought you were safe. I thought you understood. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And the whole time you were just the rich guy slumming it, collecting stories about poor people to make himself feel better. That's not true, isn't it? Emma's laugh was bitter. You could have stopped this 3 weeks ago. You could have fired Dennis the first day you saw what was happening. But you didn't, because you needed your documentation. You needed your airtight case, and we all just kept suffering while you took notes. She pushed through the back door and disappeared into the night. Ryan started after her immediately, but Margaret caught his arm. Let her go. She needs time. I have to explain, Ryan. Margaret's voice was firm. You lied to her for 3 weeks. Yes, you had good reasons. Yes, it was necessary for the legal case, but that doesn't change the fact that she feels used right now. She trusted you with her vulnerability, and she just found out you weren't who you said you were. Give her space to process. Ryan turned to look at the other employees and his heart sank. They were all staring at him with similar expressions: shock, hurt, betrayal. Maria had her hand over her mouth. Carlos looked angry. Henry's weathered face showed disappointment that cut deeper than any anger could. Is it true? Maria asked quietly. You're really the owner? Yes, and you've been watching us this whole time, pretending to be one of us. I needed to understand what was really happening. I needed proof that would stand up legally so I could protect all of you. By lying. Henry's voice was rough with emotion. By making us think you were struggling same as us. You watched Emma eat from the garbage, son. You watched her nearly collapse from exhaustion, and you did nothing. I documented it so I could build a case. You should have helped 3 weeks ago, Henry said, and the disappointment in his voice was worse than any anger. Not waited until you had enough evidence to feel good about yourself. Carlos stepped forward. We shared things with you, personal things. We treated you like one of us because we thought you were one of us, and it was all a lie. The friendship was real, Ryan said desperately. The caring was real. I wasn't pretending about that, but you were pretending about everything else. Maria said quietly. And how are we supposed to trust anything now? How do we know this isn't just some other game? Ryan looked around at the faces of people he'd worked beside for 3 weeks, people he'd genuinely come to care about, and saw the same thing on every face: betrayal. Margaret began explaining the next steps: individual meetings, back pay calculations, policy changes. But Ryan barely heard her. All he could think about was the look on Emma's face, the way she'd said I trusted you like he'd stabbed her in the heart, which he was starting to realize with sick clarity, was exactly what he'd done. Ryan sat in his car outside Emma's apartment building, his phone in his hand, trying to figure out what to say. It was nearly midnight. The building looked worse in the darkness: broken security gate, graffiti on the walls, the kind of place where sirens were common background noise. He'd been sitting here for 20 minutes,
typing and deleting messages. I'm sorry, I know that's not enough, but I need you to understand why. Delete, you have every right to be angry. What I did was wrong, but please let me explain. Delete, 3 months ago, I received a letter that mentioned you specifically. It said you used to be bright and capable, and now you were a ghost. Delete, every version sounded hollow, defensive, insufficient. Finally, he just got out of the car and climbed the 3 flights of stairs to Unit 312. He knocked. A teenage boy answered Max, based on the emergency contact forms. The boy's eyes were wary behind his glasses, protective. Who are you? My name is Ryan Mitchell. I worked with your sister. Is she here? She doesn't want to talk to you. Max started to close the door. She came home crying. She told me what you did, so no, you can't see her. I know, but I need to explain something, please. Max studied him for a long moment, his young face showing a maturity beyond his years. You're the rich guy who pretended to be poor. Yes, why would you do that? Don't you know how hard Em works? Don't you know she gave up everything for me and Mom? Max's voice was shaking now. She used to be someone. She used to be happy, and you used her pain for your investigation like she's just some kind of case study. The words hit Ryan like physical blows. You're right, and I'm sorry, but Max, please, I need to explain why I did what I did, even if it doesn't make it okay. Why should she listen to anything you say? You lied about everything, because the alternative is her thinking I didn't care, thinking everything between us was fake. Ryan's voice roughened. And that would be a lie too, a worse one. Max looked at him for a long moment, then called over his shoulder. That guy Ryan is here, says he needs to talk to you. Tell him to leave. Emma's voice came from somewhere inside, hoarse from crying. I tried, he says it's important. A long pause. Then Emma appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen, still wearing her work clothes. When she saw Ryan, her expression hardened. You have 5 minutes, say what you came to say, then leave. Can we talk inside? No, whatever you have to say, you can say it right here. Ryan nodded, accepting the boundary. 3 months ago, I received an anonymous letter. 3 pages, handwritten detailing labor violations at the Chicago location. It mentioned you by name. Emma's expression flickered, surprise, then something more complicated. It said, there's a woman here named Emma Hartley, who used to be bright and capable. She ran the morning shift at the Morning Cup Cafe, better than most managers run entire restaurants. Now she's a ghost. The system is breaking her, and nobody cares. Emma's breath caught.
That line haunted me, Ryan continued. So I pulled your employee file. I saw your application photo. You looked so hopeful, so confident. I read your cover letter about believing in hospitality bringing people together. I read the reference letter from Mrs. Chen saying you were one of the best managers she'd ever worked with, that you'd improved efficiency by 22% through systems you designed yourself. Why are you telling me this? Emma's voice was barely a whisper, because then I looked at your recent performance reviews, and I realized what had happened. You weren't less capable, you weren't less intelligent. You were being systematically ground down by circumstances and a manager who exploited your vulnerability instead of supporting it. Ryan's voice grew intense. You reminded me of my mother. She worked in restaurants her whole life, smart, hard-working, full of dreams, and the industry crushed her, underpaid her, exploited her until she was just surviving, not living. He took a breath. When my mother died, I promised her I'd build something different, something better. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that promise. I built a successful company, but I forgot to make sure it actually treated people with dignity. So you decided to what? Emma's voice had an edge. Relive her experience, role-play being poor to assuage your guilt. No, I decided to see what was really happening, because my corporate team had investigated and found nothing. People were too afraid to report while Dennis was watching. Because managers like Dennis are good at hiding abuse when they know someone from corporate is around. Because I needed proof, documented, undeniable, legally bulletproof proof, to protect not just you but everyone being exploited. Ryan stepped closer, his voice raw with emotion. Emma, if I had walked in as the owner on day 1 and just fired Dennis, he would have destroyed evidence. Other employees wouldn't have come forward because they wouldn't trust that anything was really changing. And 6 months from now, corporate would have hired another Dennis, and nothing would have changed systemically. You should have tried anyway, Emma said flatly. You should have fired him immediately and dealt with the consequences. Instead you watched us suffer because you wanted your perfect legal case. You're right, Ryan admitted. The method was wrong. Watching you, watching all of you, suffer when I had the power to stop it immediately was wrong. I made a choice to prioritize systematic change over individual intervention, and that choice had a cost. You paid that cost. I'm sorry. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. You saw me eat garbage. You watched me nearly collapse. You heard me cry in the bathroom. And you did nothing. I did nothing immediate, Ryan corrected gently. But Emma, I documented everything. I built a case that means Dennis will never work in this industry again. That means 8 other employees got their back pay. That means the system that created this situation is being torn apart and rebuilt. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. Ryan pulled out 2 envelopes. But maybe this starts to make amends. This is back pay for every hour you worked unpaid. 2 weeks of training shifts, plus the extra hours you worked covering for other people. That's 368 hours at $15 an hour, plus interest and penalties. $6,200. Emma stared at the envelope without taking it. You think money fixes this? No, but it's money you earned. Money you're legally owed. He held out the second envelope. And this is a formal job offer, not for the kitchen, for a new position I'm creating. Employee advocate. Someone who works with corporate HR to identify problems, protect workers, give voice to people who've been afraid to speak up. Someone who knows what it's like, because they've lived it. Why would you offer me that? Because I saw your application photo and I saw who you used to be. The assistant manager who improved efficiency by 22%. The woman who designed inventory systems and trained staff and handled crises. Ryan's voice grew intense. And I saw glimpses of that woman over the last 3 weeks. When the walk-in broke down and you organized the entire emergency response. When you helped Maria with techniques. When you stayed to help Henry even though you were exhausted. When you stood up to Dennis tonight even though you were terrified. He met her eyes. You're not broken, Emma. You're buried. Buried under circumstances that would crush anyone. But the capable, intelligent woman from that application photo, she's still there. And she deserves a chance to remember who she is. Emma was crying now, tears streaming down her face. You're asking me to trust you, after you spent 3 weeks lying to me. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that while my methods were wrong, my intentions were genuine, that I do care what happens to you, that I do want to help you become who you're supposed to be. Ryan's voice dropped. And I'm asking you to consider that maybe your suffering doesn't have to be for nothing. That you could use everything you've learned to help other people escape the same trap. Emma looked down at the envelopes in his hands. What about the back pay? That's real regardless of the job offer. That's real regardless of everything. Whether you take the job or not, whether you ever speak to me again or not, you're getting health insurance that will cover your mother's care. That's non-negotiable. Why? Because it's right. Because you earned it. Because Ryan's voice broke slightly, because my mother would have wanted someone to do this for her, and no one ever did. Emma reached out slowly and took the envelopes with trembling hands. She opened the one with the back pay, stared at the check, and let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. This is more money than I've ever had at once in my entire life. It's less than you deserve. Emma looked up at him, her face a complicated mix of emotions, anger, hurt, hope, fear. I need time to process all of this, to figure out if I can trust you again. Take all the time you need. And Ryan, Emma's voice was firmer now. If I do consider this job offer, it's not because I'm grateful to you. It's not because you saved me. It's because I want to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. Understand? Understood. And one more thing. Emma stepped closer, her eyes fierce despite the tears. Don't you ever lie to me again. I don't care if you think it's for my own good or for the greater good or whatever you tell yourself. If we're going to have any kind of relationship, professional or otherwise, it's built on honesty, complete honesty, or it's built on nothing. You have my word, Ryan said quietly. No more lies, no more watching from the shadows. If I have something to say, I say it directly to your face. Emma nodded once, then stepped back inside. But before she closed the door she said, "The person you saw in that application photo, she's still here. You're right about that. But she's not the same person anymore. She's harder now, more careful, less trusting. I know, she might not be the person you were hoping to find. She's better," Ryan said, "because she survived. Because she maintained her integrity even when the system punished her for it. Because she's the only person I know who stayed late to help Henry even though she was starving and exhausted herself." Emma's expression softened just slightly. "I'll think about the job offer. But Ryan, don't expect an answer quickly. Trust takes time to rebuild. I'll wait as long as it takes." The door closed. Ryan stood in the hallway for a moment, then walked back to his car feeling lighter despite everything. She hadn't forgiven him. She was still hurt, still angry, still wary, but she'd taken the envelopes. She'd said she'd think about it. And most importantly, she'd set a boundary, honesty or nothing. That was something he could work with. 2 days after the confrontation, Emma received a text from Margaret Smith. "All staff meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m. at the restaurant. Attendance on the clock. We need to address what happens next." Emma stared at the message for a long time. She hadn't been back to Riverside since Saturday night, hadn't seen any of her coworkers, hadn't spoken to Ryan again, despite 3 voicemails and a dozen text messages she'd left on read. She'd spent the last 2 days in a fog, depositing the check $6,200, more money than she'd seen in years, researching health insurance options for her mother, reading and rereading the job offer until the words blurred together. Employee advocate, annual salary of $65,000, health benefits starting immediately, education assistance up to $10,000 per year. It was more than she'd ever imagined earning, more security than she'd ever had. The kind of opportunity that could change everything for her family. But it meant trusting Ryan, and trust once broken, wasn't easily repaired. "You should go," Max said from the kitchen doorway. He'd been unusually quiet the last 2 days, watching Emma with worried eyes. "I don't know if I can face everyone." "Why not? You didn't do anything wrong." "I trusted him. I told him things. And everyone knows now that he was lying the whole time." Emma's voice cracked. "They probably think I'm so stupid, or they think you're kind," Max said quietly. You helped him with Henry, you shared break time with him. You treated him like a person because that's who you are, someone who sees people. That's not stupid, that's good." Emma looked at her younger brother, surprised by his wisdom. "Besides," Max continued, "if you don't go you're letting Dennis win. You're letting shame and fear make you hide. And the old you, the assistant manager who fixed problems and led teams, she wouldn't hide." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you get so smart? I've been watching you my whole life. I learned from the best." Max came over and hugged her. "Go to the meeting, face them, and then decide if that job is worth taking. But don't decide from a place of fear and shame. Decide from a place of strength." The next afternoon, Emma walked into Riverside for the first time in 48 hours. The restaurant was closed for the meeting, but she could see through the windows that the dining room was full, at least 30 people, staff from multiple shifts, all gathered and talking in hushed, tense voices. Emma took a deep breath and walked in. Conversations stopped, heads turned, everyone stared. Maria was the first to move. She crossed the room and pulled Emma into a tight hug. "Thank God, we were worried about you." "I'm okay." "No you're not, none of us are." Maria pulled back, her eyes fierce. "But we're going to be okay, together." Other people gathered around, Carlos, James, Henry. To Emma's surprise no one seemed angry at her. Instead they seemed worried, protective. "Where's Ryan?" Emma asked. "Not here yet," Margaret said, appearing at Emma's elbow. "Miss Hartley, thank you for coming. I know this is difficult. Are people angry? At me? At you?" Margaret looked genuinely confused. "Why would anyone be angry at you?" "Because I trusted him. Because I didn't see through it." "Emma honey," Henry said gently, "nobody saw through it. He's a good liar. No offense to him, but it's true. And you were kind to him because you're kind to everyone. That's not something to be ashamed of." "He watched us suffer," Carlos said, his voice tight with anger. But then he looked at Emma, and his expression softened. "But he watched you most of all. Watched you help people. Watched you struggle. And I think maybe that's why he's trying to change things.
because of what he saw in you. Before Emma could respond, the front door opened and Ryan walked in. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled like he'd slept in them. When his eyes found Emma, relief flooded his face, but he didn't approach her, respected her space. Margaret called the meeting to order. Everyone took seats. Emma noticed people had left an empty chair next to her, and after a moment's hesitation, Ryan sat there, carefully not touching her, not crowding her. "Thank you all for coming," Margaret began. "I know the last 48 hours have been shocking and difficult. I want to address what happened, what happens next, and give you all a chance to ask questions and voice concerns." She pulled up a presentation. First, the facts. Ryan Mitchell is indeed the owner and CEO of Riverside Steakhouse. 3 months ago he received an anonymous letter detailing labor violations at this location. Corporate HR investigated and found no actionable evidence, primarily because employees were afraid to report while Dennis Walker was present. Margaret clicked to the next slide. Ryan made the decision to work undercover to see firsthand what was happening and document evidence that would stand up legally. Over 3 weeks he gathered testimony, photographs, financial records, and witnessed violations personally. This evidence has resulted in Dennis Walker's termination, ongoing investigations at 4 other Riverside locations, and policy changes across the entire company. But let me be clear, Margaret's voice hardened. The decision to go undercover, while ultimately effective, was ethically complicated. It required Ryan to lie to all of you, to befriend you under false pretenses, to watch you struggle while maintaining his cover. She looked at Ryan. "Would you like to address that?" Ryan stood, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm not here to defend what I did. I'm here to explain it, take responsibility for it, and listen to how it made you feel." He took a breath. "My mother worked in restaurants for 38 years. She was exploited, underpaid, harassed. When I started this company, I promised her I'd build something different, but I failed. I got focused on growth and profit, and forgot that policies on paper don't mean anything if the people implementing them are corrupt." Ryan's voice roughened. "When I got that letter, I could have just fired Dennis and called it solved. But I've seen how that plays out. Another Dennis gets hired. Employees don't trust that anything's really changed, and 6 months later we're back where we started. I wanted to understand the full scope of the problem so I could fix it systematically." He looked around the room, but there was a cost to that approach. "You all paid it. You suffered while I documented your suffering. You trusted me with your stories, your struggles, your vulnerabilities, and I wasn't who you thought I was." Ryan's eyes found Emma. "I hurt people I came to genuinely care about. I betrayed trust while trying to build evidence to protect you, and I'm sorry. Genuinely deeply sorry." Silence. Then Henry spoke up. "Why didn't you tell us after the first week? Once you had enough evidence." "Because I needed to document patterns. 1 week might be an anomaly. 3 weeks showed systematic abuse." Ryan's voice was honest, raw. "But you're right, I could have revealed myself sooner. I chose the thorough legal case over your emotional well-being. That was wrong." "What about Emma?" Maria asked, her voice protective. "You spent more time with her than anyone. You saw how she was struggling. Why didn't you help her sooner?" Ryan looked at Emma, his expression full of regret. "Because I'm a coward. Because every time I watched her eat garbage or work herself to exhaustion, I told myself just a few more days and the legal case needs to be airtight. I prioritized systematic change over individual intervention, and Emma paid the price for that choice." Emma felt everyone's eyes on her. She stood slowly, her legs shaking. "Can I say something?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "Of course," Margaret said. Emma looked at Ryan, then at the rest of the room. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel betrayed and used and stupid for not seeing through it." She paused. "But I'm also trying to understand why he did it. Not to excuse it, but to understand it." She turned to face Ryan directly. "You watched me at my absolute lowest. You saw things I never wanted anyone to see. You documented my pain and humiliation." Emma's voice cracked, but didn't break. "But you also saw who I used to be. You pulled my employee file. You read about the assistant manager I was before life fell apart. And you remembered that woman when I'd forgotten her." Emma pulled out the job offer. "He's offering me a position as employee advocate. $65,000 a year, health insurance for my family, a chance to help make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. She looked around the room. I don't know if I can trust him yet. I don't know if I can forgive what he did, but I'm trying to figure out if his being wrong about the method means his intentions were also wrong. Or if someone can do the wrong thing for the right reasons and still deserve a chance to make it right. What are you asking us? Carlos said. I'm asking what you think, because you all got hurt too. You all got lied to. If I take this job, I'm essentially saying I believe Ryan can change things, that I trust him enough to work with him, and I need to know, am I being naive? Am I letting him manipulate me again? Or is there something worth building here? The room was silent for a long moment. Then Henry spoke up. I've worked 60 years. I've seen a lot of rich people pretend to care about workers. They make promises, implement policies, then go right back to exploitation once the spotlight moves on. He looked at Ryan. But I've never seen one actually get his hands dirty, actually work the dish pit, actually help an old man mop floors because his back hurt. Henry stood, his weathered frame straightening with dignity. Were you lying about being a dishwasher? Yes, but were you lying when you helped me? I don't think so. I think that part was real. Maria stood next. You shared your food with Emma when she was hungry. You didn't have to do that. It wasn't part of your investigation. You did it because you're a person who cares about people who are suffering. One by one, people stood and spoke. Not everyone was ready to forgive. Several people said they needed more time, needed to see real change before they could trust again. But no one said Ryan was irredeemable. No one said the caring had been completely fake. Finally, Emma turned to Ryan. If I take this job, if I work with you to fix this system, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing it because I forgive you. I'm not doing it because I trust you again. I'm doing it because the alternative is letting Dennis win, letting my suffering be for nothing, letting other people go through what I went through. She stepped closer. But if we do this, we do it with honesty, complete honesty. You don't hide things from me because you think it's for my protection or the greater good. You don't make decisions about my life without including me, and you never ever lie to me again. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Ryan met her eyes, his own bright with unshed tears. I'll take them. Thank you. Emma nodded once. Then I guess I'm your employee advocate. God help us both. The room erupted. Some applause, some conversations, some people still processing. Margaret immediately started talking about next steps, individual meetings, back pay calculations. But Emma barely heard it. She was looking at Ryan, at this complicated man who'd done the wrong thing for arguably the right reasons, and wondering if she just made the best decision of her life or the biggest mistake. Only time would tell. 6 weeks after Dennis's firing, Emma stood outside Riverside at 5:45 in the morning, wearing clothes that actually fit properly. Professional slacks and a polo shirt with employee advocate embroidered on it, her name underneath. She was driving a reliable used car that didn't break down every other week. Her mother was receiving excellent care from a professional agency covered by Emma's new health insurance. Max had joined the robotics club at school and was talking excitedly about college someday. But none of that was why Emma's hands were shaking as she unlocked the restaurant door. Today Margaret had asked her to lead a training session for the morning shift. The same people she'd worked beside for 3 years. The same people who'd seen her at her absolute lowest. Only now she was their supervisor, their advocate, the person corporate had empowered to make changes. She was terrified. Emma had spent the last 6 weeks in intensive training. Margaret had taught her company policy, employment law, conflict resolution, documentation procedures. Ryan had met with her 3 times a week, carefully professional, teaching her about the business side of restaurants, cost management, efficiency metrics, how to build a case for changes that required budget approval. Their relationship was still complicated, still cautious. Emma wasn't ready to fully trust him, and he seemed to understand that, never pushing, always respectful of her boundaries, but she couldn't deny that he was trying. Really trying. The Chicago location now had a new manager, Patricia Hayes, a woman who'd worked her way up from line cook and understood exactly what her staff needed. The equipment had all been repaired or replaced. The scheduling system had been overhauled. Every employee had been moved to permanent positions with proper pay and benefits. The restaurant was transformed. But Emma still didn't know how her former co-workers would react to her new role. She spent 30 minutes setting up for the training session, handouts, presentation materials, coffee brewing. At 6:15, the morning shift started arriving. Maria came in first. When she saw Emma in her new polo shirt, she stopped short, a complicated expression crossing her face. "So it's real," Maria said quietly. "It's real. How does it feel?" Being on the other side, Emma thought about it. Terrifying. Like I'm an imposter who's going to be found out any second. "But you're not an imposter." Maria came closer, her voice gentle. "You earned this, Emma. You stood up to Dennis when no one else would. You showed everyone it was possible to fight back. I got lucky. Ryan happened to be there." "No," Maria interrupted firmly. "Luck was Ryan being here. Courage was you speaking up anyway, even though you thought you'd just be fired. That was all you, Mia." Other staff members arrived. The reactions ranged from warm congratulations to cautious reservation. Emma understood. Some people were genuinely happy for her, while others wondered if she'd gotten special treatment because of her situation. Patricia called the meeting to order. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, corporate has implemented major changes over the last 6 weeks. Today Emma Hartley, our employee advocate, is here to explain what these changes mean for you and answer any questions." Emma stood, her presentation remote trembling in her hand. She looked out at faces she knew so well. People she'd worked beside, struggled with, shared breaks with. People who'd seen her eat garbage and nearly collapse from exhaustion. She'd prepared careful professional remarks, corporate-approved language about policies and procedures. But looking at those faces, Emma pushed her notes aside. 6 weeks ago she began, her voice quiet but steady. "I was standing where you're standing. I was exhausted and scared and trying to figure out how to survive another day. I was good at my job, really good, but I'd forgotten that about myself. I'd forgotten I used to manage a cafe, that I used to design systems and solve problems and lead teams."
Emma's voice grew stronger. "I'd forgotten because the system made me forget. Dennis made me forget. The constant stress and fear and exploitation made me forget who I was." She looked at each person. "I know some of you are wondering why I got this position, if it's favoritism or pity or corporate trying to make themselves look good, and I want to be honest with you. I wondered the same thing. I almost didn't take the job because I didn't believe I deserved it." Emma pulled out her phone, pulled up a photo. "This is my application photo from 3 years ago. I was 24. I just finished 2 years of community college. I was assistant manager at the Morning Cup Cafe, and I was good at it. I'd improved their efficiency by 22%. I'd designed inventory systems. I'd trained staff. I was confident and capable and full of plans for the future." She showed them the photo, the bright, hopeful woman she used to be. "That woman got buried under circumstances. My mom got sick. I lost my management job because I couldn't maintain a stable schedule. I ended up here, just trying to survive." Emma's voice cracked slightly, and slowly I started believing that the woman in this photo was gone forever, that I was just a kitchen worker who was lucky to have a job at all. Emma straightened her shoulders, but that was a lie. That woman didn't disappear. She was just buried under exploitation and fear. And when Ryan offered me this position, it wasn't charity. It was recognition that the capable person I used to be was still there, still valuable, still able to contribute something meaningful." She looked around the room. "I'm telling you this because some of you might be in the same place. You might have been here so long, been ground down so thoroughly, that you've forgotten you're capable of more. But I'm here to remind you, you are more. You're smart and skilled and valuable. And my job, my actual job, is to make sure this company remembers that." Emma clicked to her first slide. "So here's what's changing. First, every position now has a clear path to advancement with specific criteria. You're not at the mercy of a manager's whim anymore. Second, we're implementing quarterly reviews where you can provide feedback on management, anonymously if you prefer. Third, there's an emergency assistance fund for family crises so no one has to choose between taking care of a sick parent and keeping their job." She went through the changes methodically, answering questions with the competence she'd once shown as an assistant manager. And slowly she could see people's expressions changing from skepticism to cautious hope to something like respect. After the formal presentation ended, Carlos approached her. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you actually believe he's changed, Ryan, or is this all just temporary because he got caught?" Emma thought carefully. I think he's trying, really trying. Is it because he got caught, or because he genuinely wants to do better? Honestly, I don't know if that distinction matters. What matters is whether the changes are real and lasting. She met Carlos's eyes. "I'm watching him closely, and if this turns out to be just PR or temporary guilt, I'll be the first to call it out. That's literally my job now, to make sure corporate follows through, to make sure you all have an actual voice." Carlos nodded slowly. "Okay, I can accept that." As people filed out to start their shifts, Maria lingered behind. "You did good, Mia. Really good. It felt fake, like I was pretending to be confident." "That's what confidence is," Maria said with a smile. "Pretending until it becomes real. You'll get there." Emma watched through the window as the morning shift started their prep work. These were her people. She'd suffered alongside them, and now she had the power to actually help them. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. "Margaret said the training went well. Proud of you." Emma stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "Thanks. Still figuring this out." His reply came immediately. "So am I. We'll figure it out together." Emma pocketed her phone and headed to her car. She had 4 more locations to visit this week, 4 more groups of employees who deserved to know they were valued. It was overwhelming, but for the first time in 3 years, Emma felt like herself again. Not the buried, forgotten version, but a new version, stronger, more careful, more empathetic because of what she'd been through. The woman in the application photo was gone, but the woman Emma was becoming, she was better. 3 months after Dennis's firing, Emma had hit her stride as employee advocate. She'd visited all 20 Riverside locations, conducted over 200 employee interviews, and identified systematic problems that went far beyond just the Chicago restaurant. She'd also started rebuilding her relationship with Ryan, slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries. They met twice a week to discuss her findings and strategy. The meetings were professional but warm, with moments of genuine connection breaking through the caution. Today was different though. Today Ryan had asked her to attend a company-wide managers meeting where she'd present her findings to executives and managers from all locations. Emma stood in the conference room at corporate headquarters, looking at her presentation one more time when the door opened and a woman in her 60s walked in. "Emma Hartley," the woman asked. "Yes, I'm Dorothy Washington. I worked with Ryan's mother Sarah back in Detroit. He invited me to the meeting." Dorothy's weathered face broke into a warm smile. "He told me about you, said you reminded him of Sarah." Emma felt her throat tighten. That's high praise. Sarah was remarkable, fought for workers' rights her whole life, organized kitchen staff, demanded better wages even when it got her blacklisted. Dorothy took Emma's hands in her weathered ones. "Ryan said you stood up to your manager even though you were terrified, that you help people even when you've got nothing to give." That sounds like Sarah to me. They talked for 20 minutes, Dorothy sharing stories about Sarah's activism, her intelligence, her refusal to accept that suffering was inevitable. Emma felt like she was meeting a kindred spirit across generations. When the meeting finally started, the conference room was packed. 43 managers from 20 locations, corporate executives, HR staff, and Dorothy sitting in the front row watching Emma with encouraging eyes. Margaret introduced Emma, then stepped aside. Emma stood at the podium, looking at all those faces, people with power, people who'd built careers in the industry, people who might resist what she had to say. She thought about the woman in the application photo, about the assistant manager who'd once run a successful cafe, about the person she used to be and the person she was becoming. Then she pushed her prepared remarks aside and spoke from the heart. 3 months ago, Emma began, I was eating bread from a garbage can because I couldn't afford food. I was working 16-hour days, covering multiple positions, doing unpaid training shifts that stretched from 2 weeks to a month. My manager told me I was lucky to have a job, that I should be grateful. The room went completely silent, but that's not the full story. The full story is that 4 years ago, I was assistant manager at the Morning Cup Cafe. I was 24 years old and running morning operations for a successful small business. I designed inventory systems that cut waste by 22%. I improved customer satisfaction ratings by 18%. I trained staff. I negotiated with suppliers. I was good at my job, really good. Emma clicked to a slide showing her application photo side by side with a photo from 6 months ago, the stark difference between hope and exhaustion. This is what the system did to me. Not because I became less intelligent or less capable, but because I had a family crisis. My mother developed Alzheimer's, and I needed schedule flexibility. So I lost my management position and ended up at Riverside, where a manager like Dennis Walker saw my vulnerability and exploited it. She clicked to the next slide, data from her 3 months of investigation. I'm not unique. Across all 20 Riverside locations, I've identified 67 employees with similar stories. People who used to be managers, teachers, nurses, skilled professionals, people who lost careers due to circumstances beyond their control and ended up in our kitchens being told they're lucky to have jobs at all. Emma's voice grew stronger. We're not just wasting their labor, we're wasting their intelligence, their problem-solving abilities, their leadership potential. We're treating them like they're disposable when they're actually some of the most capable people we could possibly employ. She clicked through case studies. Jerome in Milwaukee, who had an engineering degree but lost his job during the recession. Ashley in Detroit, who'd been a paralegal before her husband's medical crisis bankrupted them. Maria in Chicago, who'd owned her own catering business before a divorce left her starting over at 50. These are brilliant, capable people who ended up in survival mode, and survival mode makes you hide your abilities because showing competence can be threatening to insecure managers. It makes you accept exploitation because you can't afford to lose any income. It makes you forget who you used to be because remembering is too painful. Emma looked directly at the managers. Some of you are thinking, this doesn't happen at my location. I treat my staff well, and maybe you do. But I've talked to your employees. I've heard their stories, and I can tell you that good intentions aren't enough. The system itself, the way we hire, the way we promote, the way we respond to employee vulnerability, that system actively punishes capability and rewards desperation. So here's what needs to change. Emma launched into her recommendations, detailed, specific, actionable, not just policies, but cultural shifts, not just procedures, but accountability measures. As she spoke, she noticed Ryan watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Pride maybe, or something more complicated. When she finished, the room erupted in discussion. Some managers pushed back. Others asked thoughtful questions. A few looked defensive, but one executive, a woman named Patricia from operations, stood up. Miss Hartley, everything you've described, I've seen it my entire career. I've watched capable people get ground down by this industry, and I've always told myself it was just how things were, that there was no alternative. Patricia's voice grew emotional. Thank you for showing us there is an alternative. And thank you for having the courage to name what we've all been pretending not to see. The applause started slowly, then built. Not everyone was clapping. Some people still looked skeptical or resistant, but most were standing, acknowledging what Emma had said, committing to change. When the formal meeting ended, people surrounded Emma, asking questions, sharing their own observations, thanking her for her honesty. Dorothy pulled her aside and hugged her tightly. Sarah would have loved you, Dorothy whispered. You're carrying on her work, fighting for dignity, refusing to accept that suffering is inevitable. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. I'm just trying to make sure my suffering wasn't for nothing. It wasn't, Dorothy said firmly. Look around this room. You're changing minds, you're changing an entire company. That's power, honey. That's real power. Later, after everyone had left, Emma sat alone in the conference room, emotionally exhausted. Ryan knocked softly on the open door. Can I come in? Emma nodded. Ryan sat down, keeping respectful distance between them. That was incredible. You were incredible. I was terrified. You were brave. There's a difference. Ryan smiled. You reminded me of my mother up there. Not because you said what people wanted to hear, but because you said what they needed to hear. Emma looked at him. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really do it?
The undercover thing, was it guilt about your mother, was it anger at Dennis, or was it something else? Ryan was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, all of those things. But mostly, he paused, searching for words. I'd lost sight of why I built this company. I was focused on growth and profit, and proving I could succeed. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that the point wasn't to build an empire. It was to honor my mother by creating workplaces where people like her could thrive instead of just survive. He met Emma's eyes. You reminded me, not through lectures or shame, just by being who you are, by maintaining your kindness and integrity, even when the system punished you for it, by helping Henry even when you were starving, by standing up to Dennis even when you were terrified. I was a mess, Emma said. I ate garbage. You were surviving impossible circumstances, and you did it with more grace than most people could manage. Ryan's voice grew intense. Emma, do you know what I saw when I looked at your employee file? I saw someone brilliant who'd been buried by circumstances, someone who designed inventory systems and improved efficiency and led teams, someone who deserved so much better than what she was getting. Emma felt her chest tighten. And now I see someone even stronger. Because you took everything you learned from suffering, and you're using it to help others. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building, you're leading, you're changing an entire industry. They sat in silence for a moment. I'm still angry sometimes, Emma admitted, about the lying, about being watched at my lowest. You should be. I don't expect you to just forgive and forget, but I'm also grateful, Emma continued, because as wrong as your methods were, you did give me a chance to remember who I am, who I'm supposed to be. She looked at Ryan. I'm not the woman in the application photo anymore. That version of me was naive and hopeful but hadn't really been tested. Who are you now? Someone harder, more careful, but also more compassionate because I understand what people are going through. Emma smiled slightly. Someone who eats garbage and comes out the other side, fighting to make sure no one else has to. Ryan's expression was soft, admiring. Can I tell you something? Sure. When I first saw your application photo, I thought, this is what Dennis destroyed. But I was wrong. Ryan's voice was quiet but intense. He didn't destroy you, he buried you. And watching you dig yourself out, watching you remember who you are, and become someone even stronger, it's been the most remarkable thing I've ever witnessed. Emma felt her eyes fill with tears. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know. You need to know that you didn't get this position because I pity you, or because I feel guilty. You got it because you earned it, because you're brilliant and capable, and exactly what this company needs. He stood, started to leave, then turned back. And Emma, I know we're rebuilding trust. I know it's going to take time, but I want you to know, everything I feel for you, every bit of admiration and respect, and more, it's real. It was real even when I was lying about who I was. The caring was never fake. Before Emma could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone in the conference room with a heart that was racing and emotions she wasn't ready to name. 6 months after Dennis's firing, the changes at Riverside had grown far beyond a single restaurant. Industry journals published features on the Riverside model. Labor organizations cited the company as proof that dignity and profitability could coexist, and competitors began reaching out, wanting to learn how it had been done. Emma had become the unexpected face of the movement. She gave interviews, spoke on panels, appeared in a documentary about labor reform, and even enrolled in night classes for a management degree, less for advancement, more to better understand the systems she now hoped to change. Her relationship with Ryan had shifted too, slowly and cautiously, into something resembling partnership. They now met almost daily, sometimes for strategy, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for conversations that hinted at something deeper growing between them. Today they stood together in the renovated Chicago location preparing for a 6-month celebration. Employees from all 20 Riverside locations had come. Maria with her grandchildren, Henry now fully retired, Carlos newly promoted, Jerome from Milwaukee, Ashley from Detroit. People who represented the new Riverside. You did this, Ryan murmured. Emma shook her head. We did this, all of us. This happened because people were brave enough to believe things could be different. The celebration opened with speeches. Patricia, the new regional manager, spoke about policies implemented across the chain. Margaret presented data, higher retention, stronger financial performance, and record employee satisfaction. Several workers shared how their lives had changed under the new system. Then Emma's name was called. She hadn't prepared to speak, but when she stepped to the front and looked at the sea of faces, people who had trusted her with their stories, she knew exactly what to say. 6 months ago, Emma began, I stood in this kitchen feeling hopeless. I thought suffering was just part of life for people like me. I thought there was no alternative, no way out. She paused. I was wrong. Change is possible, difficult, slow, met with resistance, but possible, because change isn't about one hero swooping in to save everyone. It's about people refusing to accept that suffering is inevitable. She pulled up a slide, her application photo next to the image taken by HR, the day Dennis fired her. This was me before Dennis, and after. The difference between hope and exhaustion. Then she clicked to a third photo, herself now. And this is me today. Not because someone rescued me, but because I was given space to remember who I am. That is what we're building here. Not charity, not savior stories, a system that recognizes people's inherent value and lets them shine. She clicked through employee transformations. This is Jerome. He has an engineering degree. Dennis never asked. Now he's assistant manager and redesigned our kitchen workflow to improve efficiency by 15%. This is Ashley. She was a paralegal before medical bills destroyed her savings. Now she's our employee relations coordinator, helping others understand their rights. This is Maria, 12 years running her own catering business, before circumstances forced her back to square one. She hid her expertise for 6 years. Now she's the general manager of our Milwaukee location, with the highest satisfaction ratings in the company. These aren't rescue stories, Emma said. They're reclamation stories, people being given the chance to remember who they are. She took a breath, and we're not done. Ryan and I are launching the Sarah Mitchell Foundation for Worker Dignity. We'll consult with companies, train employee advocates, and help workers reclaim their voices and power. The room erupted in applause. Emma spotted Dorothy Washington near the back, tears streaming down her face. When the crowd settled, Emma added, before my mother's Alzheimer's took away her clarity, she used to say, baby girl, you're not defined by your worst circumstances, you're defined by how you rise. We're rising, and we're making sure others can rise too. When the event ended, and the crowds drifted out, Emma slipped out to the back steps, the same gritty steps where she had once sat exhausted and invisible. Ryan joined her quietly. You know, he said, when I first saw your application photo, I thought my job was to restore the woman you used to be. And now, she asked, now I know you're not that woman. You're better, stronger. You lead because you understand both hardship and possibility. Emma looked down at her hands. Can I tell you something? Always. I'm not angry anymore, she said softly. About the undercover investigation. About the lies. I've held on to that anger because it made sense at the time, but now it's holding me back. Ryan blinked, surprised. From what? From possibility, partnership, maybe even something more. She took a breath. Your methods were flawed, you hurt people, but you also changed everything. You built something that honors your mother's memory, and you did it imperfectly but with genuine intention. Ryan's expression softened. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm ready to trust you again, carefully, with boundaries, with honesty, not blindly, not naively. She looked at him fully. I think the man who watched me eat garbage and the man who fought to give me my life back might be the same man, complicated, flawed, but trying. Ryan reached for her hand, hesitated, waited for her permission. Emma extended her hand, letting him take it. I can wait, he said quietly. However long it takes. I'm not asking you to wait for perfection. Emma replied, I'm asking you to walk with me while we build this, the foundation, the movement, whatever comes next, as partners. Partners, Ryan echoed, squeezing her hand. I can do that. They sat together as the sun dipped behind the Chicago skyline, two people shaped by hardship, choosing to build something new, not from rescue, but from dignity, trust and hard-earned belief that every person deserves room to rise. And that belief, Emma realized, was no longer just policy. It was the beginning of everything.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.